Hi, guys. Today we are lucky to have the presence of Mr. P. Djèli Clark. In Brazil, he is well known for these two publications here, Ring Shout and Master of Djinn. And I've have spoken about his work before, but for the few people that may not follow me that much or for a long time and don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, Brazil. My name is P. Djèli Clark. I'm a writer of speculative fiction. When I say speculative fiction, I write fantasy, a little bit of science fiction, some horror. I don't like to be defined, so I write all the stuff that I can, that don't let me write. I'm from the United States, though my parents are from the Caribbean. And when I'm not writing, I'm also a professor of history, where I study slavery and emancipation, where, as you can imagine, Brazil comes up.
It's a big part of our history as well. I like to begin our interviews just letting everybody know that here you are free to curse as much as you want. You have a daughter at home, so I don't know if you're like a big curse person.
Oh, two, and they'll be around here somewhere.
Yes.
So no, not good.
You're not
I'll
like
cut it out.
it's fine, but if you want to, you can.
Yeah.
And so we can all feel comfortable. There's a ritual that we like to know. What's your most used curse word?
No, I guess the most used one is the F one. I mean, it's just like, because I barely mean it. Like the others, like they just slap out. But if I say that, especially if it's a long, like, that means like something happened. It's like real. Yes, I guess that would be the most used.
Okay. So I, like you said on your introduction, that you're a historian. You have like that's your academic stuff. You studied history, and you dedicate much of your life to it. And I believe, I don't think I'm wrong, that it's pretty noticeable, your relationship with history in your books. Your books, they toy around a lot with history and alternative histories. You talk about geopolitics, you talk about racism, sexism, like political to social stuff. And that's very, like a big part of your books. And that made me think, because you're an academic, you're just not someone that enjoys history. You dedicated a bunch of your time in it. And I wanted to see your take on, in your opinion, what can a work of fantasy do that an academic or an informational paper cannot do?
Oh, well, for one, fantasy does not make you read a bunch of footnotes. So that's great. That's the number one thing when it comes to reading speculative fiction versus, academic work. So I was like, no footnotes? Excellent. Unless I'm trying to be quirky, no footnotes. But also, no, I think that there is several things. I think the biggest thing is that it creates accessibility, right? I always say that this is my thing as a historian, all speculative fiction, I say, is based on history. Whether you're doing Game of Thrones set in the past and you're basing it on some kind of version of War of the Roses, or you're doing Dune and you're, 10,000, 20,000 years in the future, what are you basing it on? You're based on issues of oil wars and resource wars, right? And I say all speculative people, all people who write fantasy fiction, science fiction, pull on world history because it's the only history we have. The aliens haven't showed up to tell us their history. The dolphins have been quiet about whatever history they got going on. And so all we got is ours. And so I would say it's a matter of how much we do it and to how direct we do it. And so there's a lot of my speculative fiction, like you said, if Master of Djinn or Ring Shout, I'm pulling directly from periods in our history and I'm altering them, bringing in magic, bringing in different things. And then there are other works I have, like my last work, The Dead Cattail Assassins, which is a completely secondary fantasy world. And I get to just make up whatever I want. It's not our history. It's not our world. I get to do what I want. But even there, if people dig deep enough, it may not be as direct, but you can definitely see the various histories that I'm pulling on. And so one of the first things that I think that fantasy does is allows for accessibility to people who are like, oh, I don't want to sit down and listen to history. You just watched all of Dune. Guess what? You got history and you didn't know it. So I think it allows us to talk about issues and ring shout, talk about issues, racism and power in ways that maybe people might be bored academically, or they might put up walls, but let's say I want to talk to people about the rise of fascism and how a republic can descend into fascism. I can try to have that speech and people might be, oh, I'm bored already, or walls will go up. But then I'll say, guess what? I'm going to wrap it in lightsabers and Death Stars, and you're not even going to notice that when I say stormtroopers, I'm pulling on ideas of Nazi German troops, right? And I'll wrap it in all of that, and you're going to love all the pew pew and the robots and everything else and the Force, and you may not even notice that this whole time I've been pulling on history and giving you elements of history. So I think that is the great thing that storytelling does. And I think that's a human thing. I think that's why storytelling is such a long part of humanity, is that we can express all of these philosophical points and things that maybe we can't do academically, but we can certainly do it when we explore through storytelling, fantasy, and fiction.
Keeping on that note, in your work, and I actually watched a bunch of your interviews, and it seems clear to me that there's a struggle over imagination. Like I heard you say about how the first KKK, which is just a side note, I didn't even know that there were two KKKs. Like
there's like 4 or 5 by now.
I didn't know anything like it. But watching your interviews, like in your book, made me research a bunch of things. So I ended up learning. But you said how the first KKK, like, it used theatricals and they made up a whole aesthetic to convey that they were monsters and they were more than they actually were. And you also said how the oppressed people, or the enslaved or former enslaved people, they also created narratives to deal with reality. So that made me wonder a bit, because I think that fantasy and science fiction, they are often portrayed as something related to childishness or frivolity. It's something that is not that important. It's just fun.
Right.
And how do you watch, or in your opinion, what's the role of fantasy and science fiction in political struggle and social struggle?
No, that's a great question. And I think, so I'm of two minds of this. And I think you're right. I think it's always this duality, right? It's almost, with Du Bois, it's almost kind of double consciousness we want to put into this. On the one hand, all of these things have interesting political points, right? If I'm talking Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, here's a person trying to talk about his trauma, his PTSD from World War I. So his dead marshes have to do with, battles that he saw in France and the dead he saw lying there in the mud in France. His Ents, the talking trees, versus the orcs, are supposed to be his fears of what industrialization is going to do to the environment, right? And so we have this ecological battle. And then people have speculated a great deal on what he's trying to say about the ring and the issues of war and how. So there are all these political things wrapped up in that. And I think it's great when you understand those things. I think it's, like you said, I love it when geeks and nerds, when we're like, no, this is serious. I know you think it's just fun, but look at these deeper elements that are under here. On the other hand, I like that we just like, oh, look, a talking tree, right? And I think that's the great thing about speculative fiction. It can do both. I can escape when I want to escape, and I can also see that there are these deeper things in there, right? I can just like Star Wars, because I like zoom, zoom, lightsabers and pew, pew. And then I can watch Andor, and see like, whoa, this is one of the deepest, most politically minded things ever. And I think that's the great thing about speculative fiction. We can decide when we want to turn our brains on, because we need escape. And we can decide when we want it to be, when we want it to remind us of our childhood, when we want to be entertained. And then we can dig deeper and say, okay, let's see what this is really talking about. Let's see what deeper themes there are here. And I think that's the great thing about it. Yeah, it can do both. And it can be both. And there's nothing wrong with it being either one to me.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I always like to say that, to me, like, peak fantasy or science fiction is when you're able to have fun as much as you want,
Yeah.
but there's something behind if you choose to go after it. Like,
Right.
you can, like you said, you can go to a Star Wars thing and have fun with the lightsabers and the pew pews. But if you choose to, there's a bunch of other stuff there that you can engage with. So I 100% agree.
You can engage with that. And not only that, I just want to add, because here's the flip side. And I always say this is where the geeks and nerds can get hypocritical. When we do critique things that might be not as nice, right? Going back to Tolkien, we can critique Tolkien's interesting issues, around racialisms. I won't say racist, but certainly there are racialist ideas in orcs and the Eastern Other. And even though he has said before, hey, I'm just pulling on medieval European ideas, great. However you're doing it, it's still there.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And so when I would get people, I get pushback and I'd be like, oh, it's just a story. And I'd be, it can't be that we're all happy that it's deep and it has these stories about the environment and ecology when it benefits us. But when we get into, let's now critique the things that the sexism or the racism is like, oh, no, it's just a story. It can't be, you can't do that, right? It has to be a full spectrum. We have to take good, the bad, and the in-between. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually, I agree with you. And you're on point on something very particular, because I think it's funny how this pop culture media, it can transit between being so meaningful and so impactful when people choose to, but when it's that, it can be just fun when they choose to as well. But no, you both ways.
Yeah. Right.
I like to talk to nerds about it like you, because I get excited about it. That's
yeah. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It's got to be both, right? You have to be able to do that. And I think as you mature as a person who loves this stuff, as you mature, I think you're able to do that more. I think I understand there's a point at which you don't want to, because these are my beloved things. I don't want you telling me any of these other things about it. But I think as you get to this point of maturity, you say, okay, I can take all of that and I can still like it. I didn't tell anybody, when I sell those things, I haven't thrown out my Tolkien books. I have a giant book of Tolkien right here, right? The Lord of the Rings and everything else. I can critique all those things and I can still like it. Yeah, exactly, right? I can still like it. And then I can decide, oh, here's mine. Here's mine if you can see my bookshelf.
It's blurred. I think the filter is blurred, but
okay, yeah, that's right. I blurred you guys out.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But I saw a bookshelf and it's big.
But the whole point is, I think you can do both, and that's fine.
And actually, not only fine, I actually enjoy it a lot today. Like, it makes me appreciate it more to know all that it's a complex piece of work, that it's not some silly stuff, that it has something that I don't agree with, and it's fine. It depends on what it is, but
depends. And it's also, I tell people, it's also your right to say, I don't want to engage in that.
Exactly.
You don't have to. Like, people be like, you have to go read Lovecraft. No, you don't.
Exactly.
You don't have to. It said, I want it, and I'm telling you right now, you don't have to read it. If you don't want to, live the rest of your life. You're not owed any of these older. You're not owed. Nobody is owed your time.
And I really hate this trend that like the must read. Nothing is a must, and especially with these classics like Tolkien, and like, I enjoy Tolkien, but I know the people that don't enjoy it, and it's fine. You don't have to.
And that's fine.
I know it's kind of, sometimes it can be boring or hard to engage with it. It's fine. You don't have to read it.
Yeah. There's so much.
Yeah,
you can do something else.
Exactly. And I like that a lot. Well, speaking more of your work specifically, because like I said, I'm a huge fan, and there's something on both your books that are published here that I really enjoy, and it's, I'm going to put quotes in it, your magic system, because you do something that I really enjoy, because you portray magic in a way that I enjoy a lot, that it doesn't have like a hierarchy. Like, it's not like structured in stone and like who's more powerful than who. And actually, like, I'm gonna use it in the best way that I can think of, that it's kind of a mess, because you know that there's a lot of stuff that we don't need to know, but we know that they're there, that the world that you created is big enough that we're getting just a part of it, that there's other gods that maybe they're mentioned, maybe they're not. in Ring Shout in particular, like you can see them as gods or as aliens or as cosmic beings or multidimensional things, and it's not set in stone. And I do enjoy that a lot, because I think that magic, when it's too much described and too set in stone, I find it kind of boring.
When you can see the wizard, you get to see behind and see the wizard, like in the wizard, right? I'm the same way. I sometimes get like I'm watching Stranger Things right now. I love Stranger Things, but I'm getting it all explained, and I'm happy to have it explained. But I'm also like, oh, I kind of liked it when I just didn't know everything. And I tend to do that when I'm writing. You're right. I do that with my magic systems and my world building, where I'm trying to give you glimpses into this world, but I want to keep the mystery there. I want to keep it that you don't know everything about this world. I want you to understand, I don't know everything. I get this all the time when I teach workshops of world building, and I'll have writers say like, I've created this world and I don't know everything that happens. And I say, do you know everything that happens in the world you live in right now? Do you know what's happening right now in I don't know, Paraguay? Do you know what's happening right this second? I said, then you don't need to know. You need to know what's good for your story. And I said, here's a little trick. Hint at things happening outside of wherever your story's set. Hint at larger things that you don't have to have the answers to. Now, once you go write on a book, then you might have to figure it out. But you don't have to have the answers to all that yet. But make it mysterious. Make your world look bigger and larger. And I try to do that with my reading whenever I create world building, because that to me is the fun part. I love painting myself into some corner where I just have not explained. I have a book, for instance, The Black God's Drums. And it's an alternate world where the American Civil War is still going in the 1880s, and there's steampunk, and there's this, and Haiti has played this big role. And there's a point there where I said, like, the crazy Californians with a K in their Russian dress, right? And somebody was like, what does that mean? I said, I don't know. I just know California, Alaska, Russia. It's like, there's something there, and there is a tie between Russia and California, but I'm just doing alternate history. I haven't figured it out. It's up to you. Imagine it if you want to, write some fan fiction, but that's how to me, that's the best kind of world building that I like to read. Whether I'm reading my Wheel of Time or my other things, I love that kind of expansive world building where I'm allowed pieces, but not all. And so I think I inherited that from the stuff that I write, and I try to do it when I write.
And I agree with you. I think particularly on Master of Djinn, how you talk about the other nations and their relationship with magic.
Yeah.
And you kind of like hint of how it works, the structures, but you don't tell us too much. And it only made me feel like, I want to know, like, that if this works in here like this, maybe they'll, and I started doing it. And I think that's brilliant. But I was wondering one thing, like, was there any situation that like you put yourself like in a, like you needed to, I think I'm going to remove this because I don't know what's going on. Like, is it when you're creating your own world?
Yeah. Well, there's always, in world building, there's always the fear that you can do so heavy into world building that you're info dumping and you're moving away from the story. And so I always have to be careful of that. So I'll tell you, there is like I have my idea, I have my points when I want to world build. I have my little secret points. Like if people are eating, I think eating is like one of the unsung heroes of world building. The type of food people eat is just, you can world build just on that, right? And it's also time people are talking. And I mean, yes, I know my parents don't talk while you eat. Tell my daughters all the time, but we do it. That's why eating is something, it's so human. All human beings come together and socialize and eat. I don't care where you are. Everyone does it. So it's an experience that everybody can understand. It's a great way to lay out the world, the characters, and everything else. The other part is, my protagonists ever get in the library. Oh, it's a great time. And so there's a point in Master of Djinn, for instance, we're in the library, and I know I'm about to hit people up with a lot of world building. And I did. That was a part where I was really careful. And there's certainly things I edited out and I left and I said, okay, I'm not going to go that far. Or I touched on it, but I said, you know what? I'm not going to touch anymore. Let them, like there's a point there, for instance, where I think one of the main characters there is this, it says something about in a part of India, he's worshipped as a type of God, right? Because of what he did. And somebody caught that. They said, you took that from the Chinese explorer Zheng He in the 13th century with his giant junk ships, who was worshipped as a type of god like near Bengal. I said, yeah, good catch. right? But that's what I want folks to do. I want folks to like catch that kind of little things I throw up, but I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to say he's worshiping God, just like saying, hey, the Chinese. No, that's too much.
Well, and I'm going to.
I find myself self-editing when I do that, and then sometimes things happen.
And I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent because you said about the food and the library and stuff like that. But one thing that caught my attention, a little bit on Ring Shot, but a lot on Master of Djinn, and I really wanted to hear you talk about it, is the clothes. You describe clothes in a way that I find very unique because it not only like it makes me visualize things, but it makes me understand like in a weird way, like the culture, the climate, like a bunch of other stuff. And I think that it also helps world building, like what kind of clothes like female uses in this world, in this setup, in this time. Like a Master of Djinn in particular, like you use that a lot. And I think it's fun. And I actually did a lot that I stopped to try to visualize what you described. And I thought it was amazing. And I wanted to know, like, if you have any particular inspiration on fashion to go that route, like if you're visualizing, you're thinking about something in particular.
Yeah, no, that's great. So thank you on that. I will say that probably I've inherited that from my favorite writer, Robert Jordan. If anybody's read Wheel of Time, literally this man can spend a page talking about an Aes Sedai's hat. Right? And it's kind of a good and bad thing because there are times people have been like, my wife is like, you spent too long talking about this clothing here. And I have to like, let me tamp it down. But I think it's interesting the things you pick up as a creator from the stuff that you love, right? I think it's just natural that you do. And so I've always thought, much like food, that clothing is really important. And I spend time literally researching what kind of clothing people should be wearing. I have Google pages. I try to find, like, in both Ring Shout and the Master of Djinn, I was going through and looking at old catalogs from the early 1900s to see what does women's wear? Like, have high heels been invented yet? What kind of women's boots were it? And then, and then I'll find some great pictures like Maurice's outfit. Yeah, from Ring Shout. I literally found like an advertisement of a woman wearing like a movie director's kind of outfit. And I said, that is perfect with that news hat and the everything else from that era. And I transposed that, right? What you call it, suit, chef suit that she wears when she's in the juke joint is literally the same suit that if anybody watched Boardwalk Empire, Michael White as Chalky White is wearing this same suit. It's the exact same suit. And so all of the inspirations can come from anywhere. When I'm writing A Dead Cat Tail Assassins was a bit more complicated because it's fantasy. And so there I was doing a lot of Arcane was a big inspiration. Going back and doing old, I'm blanking right now, but old video games and old fantasy and what she would wear. And, it was just pulling on that wealth of information that we get just from reading, from watching. And then in the Master of Djinn, I had a lot of fun there because I was trying to imagine this world of a 1900s Cairo. And there's so many images, so a lot of things to pull from. But I was also trying to kind of modernize it a bit because because so many things have happened in this world. So for instance, like I have women there with colorful hijab. And actually during that period, more people would have likely worn black, right? Would have been the normal color. But I know that later on, many women around many parts of North Africa, MENA, the Middle East, North Africa, and elsewhere, parts of Africa, they start using more colorful garb. And some have been doing so much earlier. And so I said, I'm going to jump ahead and have that done where I can have this colorful garb. And so things like that, or imagining what a kaftan looks like, or a gelebeya, when I saw some more modern takes on it from actual designers from Egypt and parts of the Near East who were like, we're going to redo the kaftan in a more modern look, like collarless. And I said, I'm going to put some of that in there. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that. It always is. But yeah, it takes some of it is just off the cuff. I remember that thing from Chalky White, or I've looked into the magazine, or it's just stuff that I create. Yeah, but it's fun.
I would like to see you like design clothes. I think that would be fun. You should try that. Like, what? Just to see, like.
Yeah. Like I can't pull off Fatma's dress, but I can dress her. Like I said, but me, I can't pull that off. It won't fit me right. I wish I could pull it off like she does, right? Just those smooth lines and everything.
Yeah.
I can imagine, but I can imagine
your characters, like they're stylish, like
yeah,
like that's a big thing on it. And speaking of like clothes and accessories and stuff like that, I really wanted something in particular. Like I wanted you to talk about it because there's a particular accessory in Ring Shout that I enjoy a lot, and it's something that fantasy like has a bunch of it. That is a sword, and your sword in Ring Shout, like now it's on my top 5 favorite swords of fantasy. And fantasy, like there's like this big pantheon of swords in fantasy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, like, where did you take the inspiration for yours? Because like I can see some similarities between like Stormbringer, stuff like that, and
Stormbringer.
Yeah, but even though like it's unique, like the lore of your sword, it's something that I haven't seen before. So I really wanted to hear, where did you take the inspiration for this sword?
You hit it. Like thank you for that. I mean, I'm glad you love it, but it came from reading all this type of fantasy, reading Adamander's Rake's sword, from Steven Eriksson's Malazan, or the old swords from Moorcock. I love the idea. I've always liked the idea of sentient weapons. I mean, even the One Ring, right? The One Ring has a mind of its own. I love the idea of weapons that, that they are thirsty. They want something. There's more behind them. I love weapons that just appear. I love weapons that can just, you pull them out of some pocket dimension or some void, and they just come to being. And so I wanted to have that in this story. And I used like this African ceremonial sword that's not even normally used. And then I made it bigger because I was thinking like anime. Anime will have skinny girl with a giant cleaver, and I wanted that feel to it. I wanted this sword that was large and light. And so it came from pulling all those things and putting them in there. Because I always tell people, like, Ring Shout's a lot of things. It's horror, it's gothic. I let people define it. But at its heart, I was writing a fantasy story. It's about a heroine with a sword who fights monsters.
I like that. I like that a lot.
It's setting that people wouldn't expect, right? People are not expecting the 1920s, South. But it is a fantasy story. And so she had to have a bad fantasy sword. And then, the fact that the sword pulls on enslaved people and souls, it was just my own spin on various things that I'd seen from D&D campaigns and everything else. And I always tell them, when you're world building, all that stuff that you like, use it. And then find your own way to slap your own patent on it, right? But pull from all that stuff that you love the best. From I don't care what TV show or comic book, there's something there. I mean, there's some of Ilyana Rasputin's soul sword from, the New Mutants in there. There's a little bit of everything. But that's what I would say. Throw that kitchen sink together and beat your own sword into being.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the sword. That was like something that I really enjoyed on the book. And well, on some more serious tone in Ring Shout, you also do something that I enjoy a lot, and I think that people tend to overlook. I think there's this concept that when people are going through some struggle or war, conflict, or trying to survive, like they put their life on pause. And they get to have fun or fall in love or have like connection between one another in community. And I think that you throw that aside. Like your characters, they go to parties and they have fun and they create.
They have sex.
They have sex. Music is a big part of their life, and that's something that it happens a lot in war scenarios and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on it and elaborate on how was it to. How to put that without disrupting the cadence of the story, because your book has a lot of action, and I think that when people go to that type of book, they expect the action, and sometimes they don't expect what you put in it. But in your book, it goes with the flow. Like the pacing is just amazing. So I wanted to know how you choose to put now they're gonna have this moment that is not what people might expect if they want just a bunch of fight.
Yeah, I call it like people who want like super adrenaline action, which I like too. But I always, like, when I was going to say, did anybody stop to go to the bathroom? Like, have they eaten? It's like no human being can actually, do that kind of pulp, bang, 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 bang. And it's fun sometimes, but I just like to make it real, right? That people have to go to the bathroom, people are going to do this. And in this case, people are going to have fun, and it's the time that you said it. They're probably not going to do that. I purposely said it when their lives are dealing with they've kind of normalized that we're dealing with these monsters. And it's after that things speed up more. And so you're not going to see them do that in between that, right? And so it's always this, where do you put it? You put it normally at the time when they can still do that, before things live completely. Remember, their normal is not our normal. Their normal is we fight these monsters, they exist. And so in that normal, they're going to go around and also do normal things, like go to this juke joint, like, have sex and do all these things. It's when their normal gets thrown off that those things become less of something they can do, right? And so, but I agree with you. I think it's really important. It's also part of world building. I think it humanizes your characters. And, I teach slavery and emancipation. And one of the things I often have to do when I teach about slavery is that people see enslaved people almost like, not as human beings, but as like a category. And I have to tell them like, well, they did everything else. They did everything you do. Right? Under all this duress. They want to have fun. They tell jokes. They argue with one another. Some of them hate each other. Right? Some of them love each other. Some of them fall in and out of love. Some people cheat on each other. They're human. Right? They're not superheroes. They're not tragic figures that you can't relate to. They are human beings in this situation. And within the situation, they try to do what they can do to hold on to humanity. And they do all these human things, good or bad, right? That's the thing. And so it's funny, a movie I showed it works is I show Quilombo, because I teach a class called Slavery in Film. And I showed that 1980s film Columbo. And they're always dancing all the time. I said, yeah, they're having fun. I said, yes, they kind of overdid it. Because he kind of overdid it with the dancing. But his whole point was that these folks also, even under this duress, they are trying to live their lives. And so, I definitely tried to show that wherever I can.
In both your books that are published here in Brazil, we talked a little bit about it, but you use a lot of reference of history, known figures and movements, political movements and stuff like that. And first of all, I really enjoy that because that makes me do a lot of research later that I enjoy. Like, I want to know what's this? Yeah, and I want to know what's this? This is curious. And I think that's cool. Like, I really enjoy that. And I wanted to know, like, how do you process what are you going to incorporate in your story? And if you have anything that you really want to use, like in one story, but you haven't quite found a place to put it in.
Yeah, that second part, I can tell you, there's always that. There's always stuff that I just haven't found a place, and I'm going to get it there, right? I mean, you look at like the idea of the Night Doctors, for instance, from Ringshot. Night Doctors was a separate story arc. And I was like, I wrote that story and I was writing Ringshot, and I was like, can I bring it in? Can I do a comic book crossover in a book? And I was looking around. I was like, wait a minute, who am I talking to? Nobody can tell me no. And so I did. I brought in these characters and I use, multiple dimensions and so forth to bring them in. And so there's always stuff. And I was like, I can't leave them out. They got to be part of it. And so I brought them in. And so, there's always stuff. Sometimes you can bring it in. Sometimes you can't. And there's always stuff that surprises you when you're doing research. And especially with history, you never know what you're going to find. And I remember I was doing work for Master of Djinn. I knew that the West African princess Amina, who you meet kind of there, was going to be there. And I knew I knew about, the Empire of Tukalor and all this. And so the Sokoto Catholics and all, and I knew about this character. What I didn't know was that the person who would be her great grandfather, whatever, who founded it, that is well known, had made a Hajj to Mecca and had met who was going to be later on the Basha of Egypt, had met him in Syria and healed his son because he was a mystic, right? And it's after doing that he heads back to West Africa and conquers and creates this large caliphate. And I was like, what? And so I was like, okay, this is, now I knew that I had the pieces, but how everything fell together like Tetris, right? And I was like, this is perfect. And I actually incorporated where it's like, oh, maybe he prophesized that Al-Jahi, I used that. And so you never know in the research what you're going to find. There's always going to be something that blows you away, and you're like, I got to use this in here. And it's not always the case that you can, but in some things like that, I was like, no way, I'm not going to mention that. There's no way. That's too on the nose.
Particularly on Ring Shout, I think that you put a lot of uncomfortable situations. Like there's violence, like a lot of, and you're talking about a sensitive topic. And I think that today we have this concept of entertainment that avoids the uncomfortable, that it's just fun and stuff like that. So I wanted to know, like, how do you see this, the relationship between art and discomfort? Because I think that people mistake that, like, art needs to be like joyous and like being entertained, just that's it. But pieces of art that have a lot of discomfort, they exist and they're pretty great sometimes. So I wanted to see where you stand on the relationship between discomfort and art.
Yeah, I think again, it's kind of like a human thing, right? If I'm talking about issues of humanity, it's going to be discomfort. Now, it depends on what level it is. I think probably Ring Shout has more levels of discomfort than Master of Djinn, right? Because of the topics we're talking about. And so I knew I was going to put that in there. So the flip side of that, of course, are people who may put things like that in there recklessly. And I think that can turn off people if they're jarred or it feels exploitative. And so it's me trying to create this balance where, look, some of my works you're not going to encounter that in. And that's fine. Like people always I had someone who's like, oh, his books are always heavy. And I was like, no, some are just silly. Like Dead Cattail Assassins is absolutely silly. Right? I said, and some of them are going to be heavy. And, I choose when I want to be heavy and when I don't want to. It's kind of like, I would say, like, I love hip hop. And you can get an album and there'll be like, I used to listen to old hip hop from the 90s and so forth, and there'll be like a bunch of fun tracks. And there's that one deep track. It's like, oh, wow, you wanted to say something deep. And, the guy was, and that's how I feel about it. Like some of my works are going to have this deep moment and they're going to be deep and they're going to like sit with you. And others, I want you to still enjoy them, but I want you to enjoy them in a like, man, that was fun. Like I can watch John Wick shoot people in the head all day. And it's not a big deal, but then I can watch another movie where there's this one character is killed and I've come really close to them and I am heartbroken, right? Or that was, because people will be like, I don't like watching scenes of violence. You just watched John Wick murder like 30 people. He doesn't like shoot him in the leg. He goes back and was like, oh, did I miss your head? Let me go and get it. And I get it, right? It's that discomfort comes from, in something like that, it happens so much, you have no connection to those characters, you don't even care. Whereas in something else, you're watching 12 Years a Slave, you watch Patsy get whipped, it's horribly brutal. And there's a difference there. And so whenever I'm writing, I keep that in mind, right? When I'm going to get heavy like that, and I try to, like in Ring Shout, there's a deep moment that's going to be very, it has to do with Maurice's trauma. And it was helpful that I could have the audience view it through Maurice's own trauma. And so they were kind of prepared, like, okay, this is something that she's been hiding from, so it's going to be big. And I think if I had started the book just with that, I think it would have thrown people off and been like, I don't know if I want to go further. It has to be a buildup. But I go back to 12 Years a Slave because I think Steve McQueen does that very well. People watch 12 Years a Slave, you see these random acts of violence, but that last scene where Patsy's being whipped and you see the whip, raise the welts on her skin, he purposely waits. He doesn't give you that throughout the rest of the film. He waits till the end. And there's even a point, if you're watching 12 Years a Slave, where the camera kind of doesn't focus, like you're like a person trying to look away, and then it goes there. And then it sits. And you can't not see it. Right? And I remember when I saw that movie in the theater, I saw it several times because, the story I wanted to watch it. I remember at one point, this young woman got up and ran out of the theater, like ran over my feet because she could not, when the camera stopped, she could not sit there and take it. Right? And I said, the reason that is more powerful than John Wick killing 20, 30 people has to do with the context and everything else and the way he waited for that violence to happen. And so I think sometimes when I'm writing, especially in Ring Shout, I was really pulling on that kind of thing so that when I got there, it would have meaning, it would have impact. And also the audience would be prepared that they knew they were going to see something.
Well, following this in ring shout, and just so we can go towards the end of the interview, I really wanted to hear your thoughts, because you do something that I find very clever, and it's very necessary today. I think that you create this association between the KKK and creatures, beasts, demons from other places. And I actually heard you say in interviews that you did it on purpose to not take out the agency of the KKK. So it's not like they were influenced; they have these feelings, and they just sometimes getting a push. So the transformation between a KKK member and a monster, it's a active.
It's an active.
They're not exactly. They're not just standing. And because I've heard you talk about that a lot, I don't want to necessarily ask you specifically about this, but I find it. I enjoy talking to people like you, and I find out that we're all just a bunch of nerds. And as I know that you know, the nerd space is full of people that tend to go more the racist route, the sexist route, and there's like it's a battlefield in some ways. Like we're
people with arrested development. I think there are some people in the childish part. They like it for the childish things, but they've never matured beyond the childish thing. All they like is the pew pew.
Exactly.
And I think they end up lashing out, in what I consider childish ways.
And actually, the way that Nana speaks about those KKK members that haven't transformed, it's amazing. And I think that it's fools. That would be a great way for us to talk about them, because before we go to the end, I just wanted to hear your take on it, of what would be, in your opinion, that's totally subjective, the role of us nerds that occupy the nerd space to don't allow the foolishness to spread and to be a part. I don't know if you're aware, I think it's a delicate subject, but of the black cosplayer that took her own life like a couple of months ago, because she was having like a bunch of attacks online because she was cosplaying as white characters. So we see that stuff, and I wanted to hear you talk about this, like, what can we, the nerds that want to change stuff?
No, I think that's a good question, because I mean, like the Gamer Gators and the alt-right pipeline and all that came about. I remember I was at a Comic-Con, and they were like, "There's some of them here," and I was like, people were scared. I was like, I wish they would. I wish here's my guess. I wish a motherfucker would come up to me and say something. I'm not scared of a nerd. I'm not. So like, what? What are you talking about? I'm not scared of you. So I was like, I mean, you got these guys who, most of them, they talk a lot of noise. They can sit behind keyboards and they troll. And some of them just like, they're just, I once heard from one who was reformed. It was interesting hearing why he would harass people. Like, he would harass people like that. They said he just got a kick out of the power of it. Right? He felt he didn't have power, and it was just fun. He said, and he had to mature out of that, even understanding that he harmed a lot of people, right? And he was just like, it was like a weird thrill that I got from knowing that I could hurt people, right? He said, sometimes I didn't care. I didn't mean it. I didn't remember who I hurt. I just liked that I did it. And he was a professional troll, right? Literally, that was his thing. He talked about being reformed and coming out of that, and the space of like meeting other people. And it was just all of them trying to one up each other. Like, how can I do it worse? And anybody who's done gaming, it's terrible in there. It's just like dudes who can just say anything they want. They can just let their worst racist, homophobic, sexist id fly. And part of it is that none of them think they're ever going to see you in the street. Right? That's one thing. And they don't think they're ever going to see you ever in life. So they get away with these things. And, all the rest of us can do, and I do think there's more of us than them. I think those folks are a minority. I think they lash out because they realize that. Because they realize that the culture has moved beyond them. The culture has grown to have a great deal of diversity. And that's why they lose their minds over, a black mermaid. And I think it's showing the absurdity of what they do. And it's to keep on doing what we do. Right? Like I was like, I'm going to take the Black Mermaid and I'm going to create something. I want it all. I'm going to drink your milkshake and my milkshake. There's nothing you can do about it, right? What was it, Daniel Day-Lewis and the movie Blood? I drink your milkshake. That's what I say, right? And so all you can do is keep on doing, because they're going to get upset no matter what. I know some Black creatives who were like, you know what, we're not even going to mess with that. We're not going to take your mermaids. We're going to create our own stuff. We're going to do indie publishing. So we're not even talking about the big publisher. Guess what? The trolls troll them anyway. Building their own thing did not save them, right? They got trolled anyway. And I think it's great that they do that. But I would say you're not going to run away from it. They're going to, no matter what, I know they tell you should do your own. They don't care. They're going to come and bother. You can go do your own thing. They're going to come find out where you are and bother you. Because like that troll, it's not going to be good enough if he just exists with a bunch of trolls. No, they have to go figure out where you are to harass you. It has nothing to do with the work you're creating. It has nothing to do really with anything other than their need to find something to dominate, to be cruel about. And I think when you recognize that, you keep on creating and understand that as much as they'd like to pull us back, they're just going to be the sad puppies or whatever they're calling themselves over there doing this. Keep cosplaying, keep doing what you want, right? I saw a white kid cosplay as Malcolm X, and he didn't have to blacken his face or anything. He just wore a suit, and that was amazing. Keep doing whatever you're doing as Black cosplayers as well, and be what you want to be, and that's the best way to defeat it. And for other people to support it, right? I always say, like, when I go into bookstores now, as compared to when I was a kid, there was none of this diversity. It just didn't exist. I remember as early as like 2010s, I want to say 2012 or 2013 or 14, where cover was whitewashed of an Asian writer because they didn't want Asian women on the cover in fantasy. That's not that long ago. That was just happening. I said, now look, you go into the bookstores, you see diversity all over the book covers. Does this mean that there's not a lot of work to do? Or there's still a lot of work to do, right? But it's there. It's changed. And I think the reason that it's managing to have a staying power, even during this time when people are trying to cut all that stuff out, is that the readers, the viewers, still want it. It's what is selling. And the book world is like, yeah, they don't want that stuff that these guys want. They want this, and we're not changing because this is what sells. And I think that the role that everyone else plays, that all of us play, is making sure that we support that, making sure that we support the sinners when it comes out, making sure that we support the books and it's over from these diverse writers, from the queer writers, from the others, from the trans writers who people are trying to stop. Let them see, let the powers that be see, other stuff is still making money. So we're going to keep going with this. Right? And I think that's the best thing you can do. And as far as those other folks, let them exist in their own boxes. That's why I said shut them out so that they end up just screaming at each other. And we just keep creating while they scream. Because one thing a lot of them are doing, they're not creating.
I was going to say that.
People yelling at the cosplayer ain't cosplaying.
And you know what?
People who complain to me, I'm like, you don't write anything. Or they're writing stuff that nobody wants. Like the people who are writing is like, oh, your 10 followers got mad.
No, I think it's funny because I was gonna say that because the stuff that they create is trash. Like, have you seen this guy? He was big before he went all weirdo. It was Ethan Van Sciver, the comic book artist.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
His art is trash, and he's always talking shit
because it has to keep up with the time.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a point at which you have to be able to grow as a creative person to say, okay, what is hidden at this time? How does the world look now? Like, people aren't going to look at that other stuff because, for one, they were like, that's not the world that I understand. It doesn't work anymore. You're like, like I always say, like the show Friends doesn't work a lot because people are like, okay, the world is too diverse. I just don't buy that that's New York. It's like people are going to watch it and say like, yeah, this doesn't make sense to me. Right. And so I think you have to be able to move forward. And yeah, some of those folks, they don't not only move forward, they regress and go back. And so, yeah, their work suffers for it. I think you spend that much time complaining and hating, I think your work is going to suffer. You're not going to be able to create anything beautiful if you're just sitting there, being a dickhead. It's not gonna work. And so to me, it's like, I was telling folks, like, Keep talking. I'm writing more.
Well, I agree with you, and I really do hope that you keep writing because I enjoy what you do. And now we have this ritual that we do at the ending. That is just a couple of questions. You don't have to justify your answer if you don't want to, but if you want, you can. So we can have the final say on Mr. P. Djèli Clark. Let's go. We wanted to know one author, dead or alive, that you would enjoy having a coffee with.
I mean, can I name a few?
Sure.
I never got to meet Octavia Butler. I would like to meet Octavia Butler. I would like to meet Tolkien. Even if I had the problems, I'd like to meet Ray Bradbury. There's somebody who is like a great influence. James Baldwin. There's a whole lot of folks. I could sit there. I'd have coffee with Shakespeare. I don't know if he would drink that much coffee because it's 1600s.
Yeah.
It's just,
A fictional character that you would enjoy having a coffee.
Ooh, a fictional character. Oh wow, that's a good one. My characters, for one, would be interesting. That would be a bit of a weird psychosis. I would love to have a coffee with Sadie.
That would be a nice coffee.
It's so wild.
Look, I'm gonna cut this part out because when she died, like that was
yeah. Oh, it was hard to write. But I would I would like to have one with Sadie and City. Because I think the two of them together would be an interesting mix. Because they both kind of operate on the same wavelength.
I agree. Lord of the Rings or The Wheel of Time?
Oh, no, don't do that. I can't do that. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to pick The Wheel of Time just because I have this weird connection like to Egwene, Rand, and Perrin, and of course, Matt and company. And I Nynaeve, and I couldn't say no. But I like Tolkien. But yeah, Wheel of Time probably, but I wouldn't want to get rid of Tolkien. That's bad.
It's fine.
Yes. But no, I would have to say, yeah, I'm gonna go with Wheel of Time. Even though Tolkien is literally a precursor to that. Yeah.
Star Trek or Doctor Who?
It's really funny. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm gonna say Trek. Because I've always had a longer thing to Trek. I think I came into Doctor Who a little later. I had my best friend, like, he was always into it. I couldn't get into it until like New Who. Everybody knows it. People watch Doctor Who know New Who. And that's when I started really getting into it, especially like the Tennant run and all of that. And I've gone back and watched some of the older ones, but it still doesn't hit for me the same way. And so I definitely Trek because I can Trek since, Spock and everything else, but no disrespect to Doctor Who.
Okay. Star Wars or Dune?
Star Wars. I love Dune.
Yeah.
I like Dune. I say Star Wars because Star Wars is a thing that I can probably be entertained as well as think about the deeper parts. I think it's interesting that you could have shows like, I don't know, like the ones they have with the kids or the Rebels, right? And then you can have Andor, which is probably one of the best things I've seen. I think it's the best thing in the Star Wars universe, to tell you the truth. The Star Wars grown-ups. Where Dune to me is always for grown-ups. Like Dune, it just always has me like, well, that was depressing. As much as I like it, it's always deep. It's always intense. Whereas Star Wars, at least there's fun to be had with the intensity at the same time. Star Wars. So I mean, I love it, of course. The deep stuff.
Yeah, I would go with Star Wars as well. The same as you. I enjoy Dune, but Star Wars, I think it has more deeper meaning with me for like my childhood and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's got more than everything else. Yeah. I mean, like I love the old movie Dune. Like I love the new ones, of course. I mean, I was watching the 1980s version. I've still watched that like 1,000 times. So, I like it all.
Yeah, me too. Alien or Predator?
Oh man, I probably Alien. I like the Predator verse. I like what they're doing with Predator. I really like the one they did with the Native Americans. That was excellent. I wish they'd do more of that. It's really funny. I only think there were really two good alien movies, the first one and the second one, right? But there's something about Alien that is essential. Who remembers the first time they saw Predator and they saw the alien head in the thing, and you realize it's the same universe, and you're like wilded out. Then I think they've gone too far into trying to tell you it's the same universe. Like, I get it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, but I did really enjoy this last show. I was wondering what it was going to be like. This last the TV show, Alien Earth.
Alien Earth, yeah, no, I enjoyed
Actually, that was actually pretty good. I think I want to see them do more of that rather than making those movies that are always like,
I agree. Blade Runner or Terminator?
Blade Runner.
I enjoy.
You're hitting some hard truths here. I would say I'm going to say Blade Runner because I love Terminator, right? Especially I think probably the first two movies. Again, the first two movies are probably it, and after that it gets wonky. I don't think they've had a Terminator movie that really spoke to me since the first two.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I don't think anything since then. They're like not as memorable. Like the first two, I remember nearly everything. I could like the others, they kind of start melding together.
It's kind of weird, yeah.
But Blade Runner, look, man, Rutger Hauer's speech at the end, which supposedly he kind of also improvised on the spot with his time to die. God, that is.
Tears.
I mean, it's the movie's just art.
Yeah, I agree.
And I've seen the second one. It's okay. But the first Blade Runner, it's like, to me, it's funny. I watched that recently again, and I was like, you could have made this movie in 2025. And it would still be a good movie.
Yeah, I know.
I said that's amazing that Kubrick has had this long run of a film. No.
Well, I think you're the first person that I've interviewed that we could see you suffer in every question. Because some of them, like people will, no, it's this one.
I thought you were going to do the Star Wars versus Star Trek thing. So I was like, please, don't do that. Each one has its moment.
Yeah.
I like most of those IPs. I don't have an IP which I just dislike it. I like most of those IPs, so it's like, it's hard for me to like pick. It's just, what am I in the mood for?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I want to go back and watch Blade Runner after just talking to
you. Thank you so much for agreeing to the interview. It was an amazing experience to talk to you and to hear your insights and your thoughts about art and fantasy and science fiction, politics, everything. I enjoy your work a lot, and I'm sure, as if you see the internet, Brazilian internet in particular, a lot of people here enjoy your work as well. I hope that.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be translated in Brazil. I want more of it to be translated in Brazil.
Me too.
And they want to. This bad boy.
Yeah, we need that here too. Come on. Yeah. And Black Moms, we don't have that either. So
yeah, but I'm so happy my publisher there is getting some of this work out there, because so much of my work, a lot of my work gets translated, to be quite bluntly, in Europe.
Yeah,
it's great. I love going to Spain. I love going to France. I love meeting people, but it's harder to get into the global South. Right? Like, I think the only other places perhaps, is China and Japan, but a lot of the global South comes to Africa, much of Latin America is just left out. And then Brazil, because it's Portuguese, it gets like its whole thing. But it's fascinating. I get translated, I think in Brazil, I don't think I have a Portuguese publisher. Which I always think is fascinating, right? The colony is now the former colony is now where the largest amount of Portuguese speakers live. Yeah.
And you are here actually in two different publishers. This one.
Two different publishers.
Yeah, this is Suma, and this one is DarkSide Books. This one is the thing they do horror. They do horror, yeah. And this one it's fantasy and stuff like that. So we can finish on a good note. I would like for you to send a message to your Brazilian fans. I'm sure they're going to love hearing from you, and they're excited to get more books from you as well.
My message is thank you so much for reading. I have not visited Brazil yet. I need to make sure I get down there. It's on my list, definitely. I have to see, as a person who comes from Trinidad and we have carnival, Brazil supposedly has a carnival as well.
They say that's what they say.
I have to check that out among other things. My wife really wants us to go to the EO one day, so take our daughter. So definitely. So thank you so much for reading. Please keep reading so that you guys can get some more.
Thank you so much for everyone that stayed until the end of this interview. Once again, thank you so much, Djèli Clark, for